Good day, everyone. God bless you all. My name is Wayne Huggins. I'm delighted that you are here today to view my PhD findings as I define a model for community-based governance for informal housing and settlements within Trinidad and Tobago. The presentation is in 6 parts. Please note my contact at the top. This research is presented in its first paper, where the intention is to model governance, and in particular community-based governance. I will define governance and attempt to show its applicability. The literature suggests that governance is difficult to define, but I have come up with a definition. There are also ethical issues. The first is that there is no intention here to assign blame or be critical of any person, organization, or political party. Moreover, this is a model that can be used for understanding governance for the common good. I've attempted to deconstruct the concept of governance from the literature and to define what is good governance as a normative perception. Usually the state is ignored when in fact it is a critical piece of the puzzle. The concept therefore includes the state and looks beyond governments and political parties. The model as deconstructed now provides a basis for definition and how to measure it. I have defined community-based governance in the context of community-based organizations. It is more than connecting communities with access to tenure and infrastructure. People have a role to play, including government. It must be supported by legislation and tradition as it evolves. People do not want to continue to surrender to the utopian idea that a secular state must continue to dominate their lives. The paper, which I hope you all have read, is mainly literary review. It defines the model into the 8+1 components. Legitimacy has curiously been left out in literature as an area to focus on. It is important because it actually transcends all the other components. I have used Trinidad squatter regularisation program as the initial conceptual example. This will be field tested. It was hoped that this would have been done, but circumstances have changed. I'll be using mixed methods while I focus on the model and define it as I move on. This slide depicts a visual representation of the model using a Venn diagram. The state is defined by the outer blue line. Everywhere is in the state. You will see the 8 components plus 1. The plus 1 is legitimacy. It overlaps all the components in government space and is shown with all levels of government. The existence space for squatter regularization is shown, as well as the new and invited spaces for squatter regularization. This model shows the space assignment within the state's governance space in a sense. It is the interaction of these spaces that is important in understanding the outcomes. This is where it gets interesting. Space is a proxy for power in the interaction. The interaction can be cooperative or non-cooperative. This will lead to different sets of outcomes or equilibria. Using this framework, one can move from the visualization here, as seen in the slide, to exploring a game theoretic framework. This is where the exciting stuff starts. What can we conclude so far? The sovereign state is embedded in a socio-political and institutional matrix. It has longevity and is very stable. The community-based spaces and governance, when we define governance from a community-based governance perspective, is based on the common aspirations of the community. Governments, as separate, have a political dimension and will support strategies that ensures its own political survival. Having defined it now from the model, we can come up with a definition for community-based governance. And really, it is the manner in which the power of the community, as defined by the community space, where it has jurisdiction, is utilized in managing and controlling the social and economic resources at the community's disposal or use for the community's development in accordance with the social contract, goals, aspirations, and objectives of the community with that of the community-based organization that occupies that community space. Let's now look at some data, some real data. Let's look at the certificate of comfort, which is really an occupation license for squatters, as they have been approved from the year 1998 to the year 2020. And the graph shows the production of these certificates of comfort over time. Let's add another layer of data on this. The top arrows show the duration of different governments over the period 1998 to 2020. And you see something very interesting. What you're seeing here is the interaction of government space with the sovereign space over time. And what you would see, just to take a notion from this pandemic, you see definite flattening of the curves in certain areas, and you see peaks in other areas. And this is interesting. Ideally, you do not want flattening of the curves at all. You want to have those peaks, you want to have them very, very close together so that it really is showing delivery. Now, when you look at different stakeholders, you look at the dimensions. I have put all the stakeholders, 4 of them, with the different dimensions, and using a conceptual framework to see the governance outcomes. And this is shown here in the table. The same is repeated for the infrastructure governance outcomes. Same 4 stakeholders and the different dimensions. And you would see in all cases, the minister, the other ministers and cabinet, they are the only ones where the outcomes matter. For the ministry, squatter community, and all the squatter communities, you see no's, a bunch of no's there. The only place that you see some interaction is where there is some financial accountability at the ministry level, and a little bit of tokenism and therapy when it comes to participation for the squatter community. The next step is to move from the conceptual model and results, which I've presented, to actual results using mixed methods approaches. The first will be using the modeling using game theory, looking at both the cooperative and non-cooperative game, and to see if in certain situations where you had the peaks and you had the flattening of the curves, if these really are some sort of equilibrium, perhaps a Nash equilibrium, using non-cooperative games. We'll also be looking at the applicability and why certain policies occur and the limits of those policies based on the mathematical framework. We also want to look at intersectionality in the context of urban and social exclusion as an outcome of the prisoner's dilemma in the Nash equilibrium. We want to look at Trinidad cases in terms of the squatter communities. There are over 200 squatter communities and a private development through the Susu lands. This will test the applicability and the remodeling. We want to revise some of the methodologies to look at certain aspects, whether or not these things can occur in non-coop, if this thing actually does explain the non-cooperative games in terms of Nash equilibrium or not. We want to look at some of the Trinidad cases, and really it may be limited to just Trinidad cases. Because of the pandemic, going to the other Caribbean countries in Latin America, as I had planned way back in January, will probably not occur. And this really here defines the next steps. Listed here now are the references for this study. Some more important references here. Another set of important references, especially Einstein in 1969. Some more references. And finally, the other references where we talk about social capital and community governance. This is where it's trending in terms of the research. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the presentation and the paper. I can be contacted there for any further comments or questions, and also by WhatsApp. Thank you very much.